Hello everyone and welcome to the next session of Spring. In this session, we will discuss about the dependency injection and the first way of specifying the dependency, which is termed as setter injection. As the term specifies setter injection, that means this is something has to do with a setter method for the parameters. So first of all, whenever we are talking about setter injection, the dependency injection is specified using the setter method and a no argument constructor. Means the bean or the class which you are going to design must have a no argument constructor and setter methods for your Java class. This is one approach, or in the other words, I can say when a class is having no argument constructor and setter methods, then at that time, specifying the setter injection will be implemented. In the other words, I can say as when your Spring class or Spring Bean has setter methods and a no argument constructor, dependency injection will be specified by using setter injection V. Now for what elements we can specify setter injection? So setter injection can be specified for primitives, string-based values, dependent objects like we discussed about employee having address or company having employee, that is dependent object, or even for the collection values. How we can make use of setter injection for collection values, that we will discuss in detail when we will discuss about the dependency mapping using collection. So let's now understand how can we implement this setter injection in our application. So here we will discuss both about primitives to be inserted into or specified as a dependency, as well as other objects specified as the dependency. So first I'm creating a class named as say employee. We will put this class into a package. So say for example com.beans is the package and employee is the class. So once we will create this particular class, let's add the properties to this particular class. So private int employee ID, private string employee name. Then as per the need of setter injection, we are going to provide a non-parametric constructor for employee. Just to understand, I am adding one sysout statement over here as employee. So here, this is whenever the object is created, this particular statement will be executed. Then I'm going to have setters and getters for both these parameters. Getters are obviously not mandatory for specifying dependency injection, but if you need to fetch the value independently for any parameter, we can make use of this particular getter method. Setter is mandatory, obviously, for specifying the dependency. And this is the toString method, so that whatever object we have received, that object we will be able to print on the console. Now, once we have created this particular class, let's see how can we perform the mapping. So here we are going to perform mapping for primitives and string-based parameters. That was the first setter injection way, and then we will see how can we map an object. So we need to create a configuration file which will be required by IOC container or Spring container. So you can specify any name. I'm specifying name as beans because it holds information about beans. What is a bean? It is a pojo. So whatever class we have created, and if it is mapped in that particular configuration file, it is termed as a bean. Next, we need to specify the namespace over here, which is XSD. So that specific tag will be available for us. So currently we are going to make use of beans. This is the XSD which will be added. Now you will get list of all the available XSDs depending on what version of jar is added in your class. So click on finish. So this is the configuration file which is created, which will be referred by Spring container. Now I will map this particular bean. This bean has got specific properties. So what properties we have? First of all, we need to specify the class whose object is supposed to be created. This is the fully qualified name. Now in Java way, what we do, whenever we need to create object, we specify class name, object name equal to new class name and whatever constructor we want, parametric, non-parametric, right? Now here, Spring is going to create the object. So some information I need to provide. What is that information? Which is the class where it resides. So a fully qualified name of that particular class. Then the name of the object which needs to be created for me. This is name of the object. Then to specify the setter injection. Okay, before we go to setter injection, let's see if we have that particular object created for us. So I'm creating a main application, a desktop application. Say this is my client application, client, which will have main method. We are going to make use of application context. Then we are going to make use of class path, XML application context, because we have this configuration file, beans.xml file available in the class path. And here we need to specify what is the name of that particular file. Then this context, application context, has got a method named as getBean. What this getBean method is doing, it is going to get the object which is created for us. Now this getBean method is overloaded. Here this string, one getBean method which accepts strings. So this is going to make use of the name of the bean which we have created in beans.xml. This method returns object of object class which we need to cast to the employee. Okay? And then we will print it on the console using employee. Obviously, right now there is no data provided, so everything will be nulls and zeros depending on what data type we have. However, what output I'm expecting over here is the constructor gets invoked and this employee statement is being printed on the console. And because I'm printing this employee object, the values for EMP ID and employee name will be default values. So let's see. Let's execute this particular code. So you can see that as expected, the constructor is being invoked. So this statement is printed, and toString method, when we have executed or we have printed that particular object, toString method is executed at the backend, and employee ID and employee name is printed with the default values. So this is how it is implemented. Now you can observe one thing over here is nowhere we have created any object. Get bean method is used to retrieve the object and not to create the object. So this is one form of get bean method. Another form is what? So I have context dot get bean, and here I am specifying name of the class employee dot class. So whatever is the employee class type of object is there, get me that one. So output will be same. How we are fetching the object is different thing. So output is exactly same. Now let's see how can we specify the dependency injection for the properties which are primitives and string based for this particular object. So we are going to make use of property tag. Which property? That you can refer to the bean. So employee ID. What should be the value? So say for example, value is 1. The next property, what is the name? Employee name, and value is, say for example, John. So these are the values which we have specified. So now internally what should happen is this non-argument constructor is invoked and setter method of every property is being invoked. So let's to check whether the setter method is being executed. I'm just putting one statement, setter of emp id, to make sure that setter methods, or to check the behavior that yes, setter methods are getting executed internally. And whatever value we have specified in this beans.xml are being set for those elements. So let's execute this particular code once again. And you will see that constructor, non-argument constructor is executed, setter of emp id, setter of emp name. We haven't explicitly called it. So Spring internally calls these setter methods, and these values which we have specified in this configuration file are set for the employee object. So this is how primitives and string based values can be injected using setter injection. Let's now see how can we create a dependency through an object. So for that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one more class, which is address. Address will have two properties, say for example, private string city and private string, say pin code. Then again, non-parametric constructor and setters and getters for these two parameters, and toString method for this address object. Now let's map this address object over here first. Then we will see how dependency we can have between employee and the address. So what is the class? It is address. Let's specify the ID. Here instead of ID, you can make use of name attribute as well. Then property, name is city. Say value is Mumbai. Name of the property is pin code. and value is something like this. Now in client, what we will do is we will fetch this address bean as well. Address equal to context dot get bean. So we are mapping this particular ID over here. This returns object of object class. So casting is done and system.out.println. So now whenever we are executing this particular code, so two objects are mapped over here, right? Now what dependency I want? This employee class has got a field, say private address, and then we will add setter and especially setter for this particular address parameter, and we will add this address for the toString method. Now let's see how can we perform this mapping through setter injection. So this is a predefined bean, means object is created. This is employee. Employee has one more property, name is address. So this address class is already mapped. I'm just changing this name to ADDR so that there will not be any confusion. And here also I am changing it to ADDR. Now here we need to specify the value of address. Now for employee ID and employee name, we already have the values. And we don't have that value for the address because address itself is a bean. So to refer another predefined bean, there is a attribute which is ref. I'm referring to another bean which is already defined. So what changes I'm going to do over here? I'm just removing this address from here because that dependency should be provided internally, and some changes to check whether the address type of object is created or not. We can just have one sysout statement in address class constructor. Now what should happen in ideally? This object is created. Setter method is called for all these properties, and this object ADDR should be set for this address property in the employee class. So whenever I am executing this, you can see that this address is set for the employee where the dependency is required. So I'm just removing this non-required imports. So this is how we are going to inject the dependency using setter injection. Thank you.